welcome to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 148 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 4 of A Storm of Swords, that's Tyrion 1.
And as you know by now, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully, while we're doing all this, we'll provide you some entertainment.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They will help you in particular if you're not reading along with us. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing fine this morning. How about you?
I'm well. I'm just back from the beach. I had a nice time at the beach. I not to be outdone, I tried my hand at surfing.
Yes. How did that go? Better than me?
It went... Oh no, considerably worse than you, I think.
I don't think that's possible.
You said you got up on your feet, right?
I did a couple times, then immediately fell over.
Then worse than you. I did not come close. And I managed to hurt myself multiple times in multiple ways, despite never getting up to my feet.
That sounds like quite the trick.
For one thing, so I was, ladies, prepare yourselves, shirtless, and
and he's still my beating heart.
The board was made of like a foam material, very lightweight, but it was kind of sticky to my skin, and you're supposed to fall off when you're on your feet, right? But of course, I was falling off while I was still lying down.
Okay. I did that a couple times. I did that
multiple times. I capsized entirely. Between waves.
Between waves. Yes. Are you sure you were using a surfboard? Maybe
so
a boogie board.
I ended up abrading my whole chest and belly from sort of like the friction burn of falling off this thing.
See, I was not shirtless. I had a wetsuit top, like not the legs part, but the top part on. So I did not have that issue. But you know what I did? My right toe was battered and bloody from the way it was laying on the board, you know, because it was toenail side down, and it was so many failed attempts of rubbing against the board. It was it's still bloody. You
were supposed to move it to the right way around eventually, right?
Eventually, I spent much more time with waiting on the board than I did upright position. So.
But I kind of caught the bug, I've got to say. I've been watching like YouTube videos of people surfing, and it just looks fun and easy. And
for a lot of people, it is. Not so much for us.
No.
Ethan was fantastic. Ethan is really good at things like, obviously he played hockey, so he's good at ice skating and rollerblading and skiing and surfing. Things that require balance like that, he is takes to it quite naturally, whereas I am the exact opposite. So, Anyway.
Well, I'll try it again, but definitely wearing a shirt next time.
There you go. Yes. Good plan. I was out. We had a nice night last night. So Ethan moves next weekend, in fact. We move him to his new apartment in his new city. And we were out with his best friend since birth. They're like 3 weeks apart, and his family was our next door neighbor. So they've literally known each other their whole lives. We were out with his friend Noah's family and Noah and his parents, basically. And we had a really nice night. And afterward, we were having some ice cream, as I'm wont to do. And Noah has been a listener. And I've asked Ethan over the years, does Noah still listen? And he's like, I don't know, probably not. And so something came up about the show last night, and Noah started dropping knowledge about last week's episode. And I was like,
good for Noah.
No, are you still listening? He's like, oh yeah, I listen every week.
Oh.
And I was like, wow, that was
other people's kids are always better than our own. I've noticed that.
He said he mostly listens because it's where he gets the most dirt on Ethan.
Actually, on that subject, I was going to ask, how is your future daughter-in-law?
the
waitress.
Yeah. That fizzled out, unfortunately.
Oh,
I know.
Has Stacey re-intervened?
We were out to dinner last night, and Stacy really took to the waitress, and I was like, "Don't you dare! Don't do it!" But he was with us, so that would have made it even more awkward.
I think that would be more mortifying, actually.
Yes, I think it would.
What do you think of him?
What do you think of this guy?
All right, well, we've got a long one today, so let's get down to business.
We do.
How did we leave Tyrion Lannister? Last we saw of our man Tyrion, he was fever dreaming in bed, having been rescued from the battlefield. You'll recall that his wounds were caused by his supposed ally and Royal Kingsguard, Mandon Moore. Only the heroic and timely intervention of his page, Podrick Payne, saved him from death. Tyrion doesn't trust the Queen-appointed Maester and demands his own. His face is a mess. Mackelly, why don't we give him the summary of this one?
All right. Tyrion wakes up to movement at his door. Now that he's in Maegor's holdfast, he worries that any servant might come to finish the job Ser Mandon Moore started on the Blackwater. But it's only Bronn. Ser Bronn now, as it were. He's even got a fancy new knightly sigil, a diagonal flaming green chain on a grey field. And it was by Tywin Lannister's command that he be knighted.
I've just thought of some pedantry, actually, Mackelly. I'm going to insert it right here. I think his sigil should be a grey chain on a green field.
Oh, yes.
Like because chain would have been grey, but the background would have been the green. The last bit, and because I've interjected, you've probably forgotten what the last bit was, was that Tywin commanded that Bronn be knighted. That last bit doesn't sit too well with Tyrion. It was he who was supposed to get Bronn his knight. This, coupled with Tywin taking the Tower of the Hand for himself, seems a clear message to Tyrion and anyone else paying attention. But the bad news is only getting started for Tyrion.
His trusted commander of the City Watch, Jacelyn Bywater, is dead. During the battle, Cersei had King Joffrey pulled from his safe perch. When the Goldcloaks saw the king leave, many followed suit. Bywater tried to stop them, and almost succeeded until he was struck through the neck by an arrow, and then pulled from his horse and killed. Tywin has appointed Sir Adam Marbrand as his replacement.
This news is unsettling for Tyrion. He's lost his control of the City Watch, but he's hopeful that his mountain clansmen have returned from the Kingswood. Nope. Bronn says the Stone Crows are fond of the place and haven't returned. The burned men went back to the Mountains of the Moon, and Chella tried to return to the city with the Black Ears, but they were chased off and harassed by the Lannister Redcloaks and the people of King's Landing.
Another arrow in Tyrion's quiver gone. But being that Joff survived the battle unharmed, at least Cersei should be willing to set Alayaya free. Already done. But not without a pound of flesh. Yaya was tied to a pole and whipped before being shoved out of the castle gate naked and bloody. This has Tyrion beside himself with anger. She was an innocent in all of this, only a decoy to keep Shay's identity safe.
The whipping poses an additional issue, as he promised Cersei whatever happened to Alayaya he'd personally do to Tommen. Yet how could he possibly do that to his 8-year-old nephew? Bronn explains that there's no need for soul-searching. He's lost Tommen too. After Bywater's death, Cersei had the Kettleblacks fetch Tommen from Rosby, with no effort made to stop it. Tyrion's confused. The Kettleblacks were his men posing as Cersei's. They were, but Cersei's upped the ante, and the Kettleblacks who weren't knight, Osney and Osfrid, are now so.
Tyrion asks of Renly's ghost. Bronn fighting at the Wince Tower. Could have only been one of the Wince Towers unless he crossed, so I was right with Wince.
He's running along that chain. He earned that sigil.
That's right. Bronn fighting at the Wince Towers was too far removed to know for sure, but the rumor is running wild through the city. He asks how did Stannis escape? That Bronn does know. The Lyseni ships kept out in the bay as rearguard whisked away Stannis and his men who made it to the shore. Tyrion's heard enough and changes the subject. He wants Bronn to collect info on Mandon Moore. He doesn't explain why, as he doesn't feel it's safe to speak freely in the Red Keep. Bronn tells him also that the Tyrells are in the city in force and are loved by the people, in every sense of the word, and they're carting food in from the Reach and distributing it in the name of future Queen Marjorie.
With that, Tyrion gingerly gets out of bed and dressed with significant help from Bronn and Pod. On their way to the Tower of the Hand, they learn that despite the best efforts of the Goldcloaks, his current Tyrion Lannister has yet to be found. Bronn's sure he's dead. They find Tywin writing important letters, and Bronn and Pod are excused. Tywin tells Tyrion he visited him as often as allowed by the maester. He asks about the wound and the foe who gave it to him. Tyrion assures him that he's dead, but doesn't say who it was.
Tywin's focus has recently changed from Stannis to the Starks while they wait on the Red Wine fleet to assail Dragonstone. He knows about the Stark force heading for Duskendale and sent Randall Tarley and Gregor Clegane to trap the force between them and destroy it. Tyrion can't think of any benefit to the Starks to take Duskendale. His father urges him to say his piece and go back to bed. Tyrion wants gratitude for saving the city.
Tywin disapproves of the notion it's beneath the Lannister, and besides, a lot of people played important roles. He and the Tyrells fought nobly, and Cersei put the pyromancers to making the wildfire. Tywin does appreciate the Dorne peace treaty and says Myrcella is happy in Dorne, though he mislikes giving the Martells a hostage, but it will balance out when Prince Doran shows up to claim his seat on the small council and the summit of a certain mountain.
Tyrion preps to leave, but turns and states his desired reward from his father. He wants his father to name him publicly as heir to Casterly Rock. Tywin's response is a single word. Yes, no. Never. After a long moment, Tyrion asks why, and Tywin unloads.
You who killed your mother, you who are ill-made, devious, disobedient, spiteful, full of envy, lust, and low cunning. I can't stop you from wearing the proud lion sigil, but no gods, no men shall ever compel me to let you turn Casterly Rock into your whorehouse.
Simple no would have sufficed, but...
well, never really covered that, I feel.
It dawns on Tyrion that it was his father that had Alayaya whipped and humiliated. Tywin brings up the one he married as a boy, Tysha, and the camp follower on the Green Fork, which we know as Shae, but Tyrion won't say her name to Tywin. He then tells Tyrion that Cersei told him of his threat against Tommen. Tyrion insists he'd never hurt sweet Tommen. He's his own blood. Tywin retorts, so was your mother.
Tywin banishes Tyrion from his chambers. He will have his reward, but one of Tywin's choosing, appropriate to Tyrion's service and station. He leaves Tyrion with a final warning. This is the last time you bring shame onto the House Lannister. The next whore I find in your bed, I'll hang.
Whew. This is a great chapter.
Yeah, it is good. I think you got more excited about it than I did. I mean, it definitely moved things along down in King's Landing, you know.
Yeah, it's up to this point. I mean, we're only in what, chapter 4?
4.
The prologue and the previous 3 were pretty much just kind of rehashing. Prologue had some interesting things, but mostly just kind of, so far we've just been kind of getting a footing, reminding kind of where we were in the previous book. But this one, we got some really great new info. Of course, we also got a cool new... It's cool to have Jaime as a new POV. I think that'll be cool. I don't mean to sell that short, but this chapter just gives us so many new toys to play with. We have the Tyrells beginning to arrive in force at King's Landing. Cersei's got a wedding to distract her. We see Tyrion's just utter downfall. Bronn's rise, and then we get a Tyrion face-to-face with his father for the first time since the end of A Game of Thrones. And we finish it with resentment.
Yeah. It is interesting, though, because I think he says, I think I'm right in saying that he does, I think we skipped this in the rehash, but I think Tywin does say, you did well with the chain.
Yes.
That was helpful. So he does give him some credit, but the tricky part is, for us, we saw Tyrion doing a lot of things for the preparation for that battle.
Uh-huh.
But it isn't the way Tywin laid it all out. It's true, he was just a piece of the machinery of that battle. And his part was no bigger than even Cersei's, even though he did redirect the wildfire and probably used it better than Cersei would have done.
Yes, he definitely took Cersei's plan and ran with it more than just let's make a bunch of wildfire.
But when you put it in when you lay it out the way Tywin did, you do think, well, Yeah, you were just a part of the machine. You don't deserve any special treatment. Sure, you did a brave... You bravely went to battle where Sandor Clegane would not go.
But I do think Tyrion sells himself short multiple times in this chapter. We'll get to it more specifically when we get to that part of the conversation between him and Tywin, but I feel like when Tyrion is with Tywin, we don't see the best Tyrion that we could see. I feel like his personality changes a lot when he is around his father.
Yeah, that's probably true of a lot of sons who are, overlooked by their father.
Right.
That they become the whiny, petulant child that the father always didn't like,
yes,
around the father who continues to treat them that way.
Yes, I think there's definitely some, this is my role in this relationship is to behave this way, so this is how I'm going to behave. Yeah.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes.
I do worry for Tyrion, by the way, because, I think his medical care here has been pretty second-rate, and he's not of the stoutest constitution of anyone in the book, and he's been seriously injured, and Khal Drogo died from a very small injury.
That's a good point.
With a little help.
But... Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, he could. We could learn that from Khal Drogo, but he could also learn. He thinks that, at least going to a wedding is safer than going to battle. But he's never been to a Dothraki wedding where there's much bloodshed, much death. Yes. But it seems the Hound has officially left the city.
Yeah. So we saw him, sort of turning tail in the battle, but we weren't sure where he'd gone. He had an interaction with Sansa on the way out, right?
Yeah. He was hiding in her room, basically.
Yeah.
Asked her to come with him.
Yeah, it'd be strange if he's gone from the story, because he's been an important character to this point. And it's slightly worrying for Sansa, because he was, in many ways, her silent but important protector.
Yes. He was both her tormentor in some ways and protector in other ways. So, yeah, it's you're right. It would be disappointing if this was the last we'd heard of Sandor Clegane, because he is a very deep character, and I think he brings a lot to the table.
But if he's in the wind, then unless he becomes a POV character, we're not going to hear from him for a while. Basically you have to bump into a POV character to get in the book.
True. That's true.
People are jostling to...
Yeah. Maybe he'll become a POV. Maybe he'll be like Jaime and get his own...
So, just to mention here, I just love Bronn. I think Bronn is just one of the great characters, because he's so loyal and steadfast, but only to himself, not to anybody else. Just basically he'll... and it's completely unapologetic about it. He doesn't try to sort of sweeten it for Tyrion. It's just like...
Yeah. Speaking of great non-POV characters, Bronn being another one.
Yes.
He, as we're thinking of Bronn here, he's now become less dependent on Tyrion for his legitimacy and financial stability. And the biggest issue is that he got his boost in nobility from a Lannister other than Tyrion, which the problem there is that it leaves only his loyalty to Tyrion as the tie that binds. And like you were saying, I wouldn't wager anything on the stability of Bronn's loyalty to someone other than himself. So,
especially because from Bronn's perspective, you weigh up Tywin and Tyrion. If you get gold from Tyrion, you're getting it from Tywin.
Yes, that exactly.
You might as well just go to the source,
Yes. Back in the Mountains of the Moon, when they created this kind of pact, Tyrion told Bronn, hey, before you ever consider betraying me, come to me and I'll outbid the other party, but you can't outbid the other party if your money source is the other party.
Is the other party, exactly.
Yeah. But although we do find out what he was up to during the Battle of the Blackwater, which is something we had questioned because last we had heard he was driving the oxen to turn the winces to raise the chain, and we had joked that he just kept riding the ox out of town.
And that's funny even for the second time.
It is. But it seems that, I guess it makes sense that there would be heavy fighting at the Wince Tower, because if Stannis' men can get to that Wince Tower, they could possibly lower the chain, although at this point it might be too late to do much good, depending on when it is.
That's what I was going to say. By the time... It didn't take long from the raising of that chain to the absolute destruction of the fleet, so there probably wasn't an awful lot of point fighting for it. Maybe to let the Lyseni ships in to rescue and aid the landing, but yeah.
Right, that's a very good point.
And we've learned what happened to Stannis, of course, which was a big question for us. How did Stannis get away? Well, we knew that the Lyseni ships were left behind. Bronn speculates as a rear guard, but we know that it was simply that Imry Florent, who was the admiral of the fleet, didn't trust the Lyseni to come with them. So it wasn't exactly a rear guard. It just happened to be a little bit of racism that led to a fortuitous outcome.
Absolutely, yeah. He made several blunders, Imry Florent, but this blunder actually worked out to benefit his king.
Right.
So... yeah, we had heard a little bit about him. Edmure had told Kat that Stannis had been routed and that his fleet had been destroyed, but no mention of what happened personally to Stannis. And when we first found out about how the battle ended by Sir Dantas, he didn't know. He said, "Dead, fled. Who cares?" So, now we at least know that he seems to have survived the battle.
Yeah, I trust Bronn's more sober analysis than Sir Dantas's. But Tyrion has basically been declawed here. The mountain clans have been dispersed, and it's rough on the mountain clans. They did everything that was asked for them, But I don't know if they just gave up on the whole thing. I think they think Tyrion's not coming back. Maybe they heard he was dead.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's possible.
Because he still owes them. I think he gave them some of the weaponry he promised them, but not much more than that.
Yeah, so it sounds like they might be gone for good, the mountain clans, except for the Stone Crows. They're still in the Kingswood. They theoretically could come back, but if we saw what happened to Chella and the Black Ears, they tried to come back. Chella tried to come back into the city, but the Red Cloaks of the Lannister Guard shooed them away, and the people of the city threw stuff at them as they, in an effort to shoo them away. And it's kind of ironic because we hear this from Bronn, and then later in the chapter, Tywin says, he boasts that the Lannisters always pay their debts in reference to Littlefinger and, becoming the Lord of Harrenhal. But clearly they don't always pay their debts because Tyrion says the Blackears died for us. They deserve better than that.
Yeah, good point. So Tyrion's lost the gold cloaks because basically Jacelyn Bywater is dead, and that was his man. With Adam Marbrand being appointed by Tywin, Tyrion doesn't have any leverage there.
Right. And it seemed likely he was gonna lose the gold cloaks when Tywin arrived anyway. It's possible if Bywater had survived, he might have been able to at least have some control. But you'd have to think that Tywin, being as smart and calculating as he is, would put his own man in charge, unlike
possibly
Ned did.
Although Bywater proved himself a very good leader of the Gold Cloaks, and I think Tywin might have said to him, "Look, I'm going to keep you on. Understand, you're now my man, not my son's."
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And it'd be hard to do anything against Tywin Lannister.
Yes, it would.
But it would still be better for Tyrion because at least the leader of the Gold Cloaks would be a friend. If an order came down to the Gold Cloaks to kill Tyrion, Jacelyn might let him know. Nothing.
Very good point. Very good point. Yeah, the loss of Bywater to Tyrion is a pretty major blow. First of all, he was an honorable, honest man, and as we're learning, those kind aren't long for the world in this story. But he was someone that Tyrion felt he could trust, which is a pretty rare attribute in King's Landing.
Yep.
Just the fashion of his death tells you all that you need to know about him. He was trying to hold together a crumbling situation to save the city when he died. And we were reminded in this chapter that Cersei pulled Joff off the wall and back to the Red Keep. What he was doing when he was pulled off the wall was he was at the three giant trebuchets, flinging antlermen into the river when we last heard from him. So it's not like he was doing a lot to aid the war effort in general, but his general presence there, the lack of his presence, and then him being pulled back is what caused the issue.
Yeah. And so, once again, it's Cersei's cowardliness for Joffrey catalyzing something that's led to the death of someone useful and honorable.
Right. Yeah. And there's more tentacles to the loss of Bywater, because the loss of Bywater also led to Tyrion's loss of Tommen.
Yes, yeah.
Now, Tyrion having no fighting force or power in general at this point, Tywin would have demanded Tommen be returned, even if...
I was going to say the same thing. I mean, even if Bywater had survived, the first command Tywin would have given him was go get my grandson and bring him back, and Bywater wouldn't have had to be killed in the battle had he said no to that.
Yes. Of course, losing Tommen that way, like having him taken from Tyrion, kind of changes things a bit, because
it doesn't though, because he was in a moral quandary that he was never going to act on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's kind of my point though. He never intended to hurt Tommen. It was just an idle threat. But having him taken away, now he just looks like a monster uncle who possibly could have planned to harm his nephew rather than just, it was just a bluff.
Here's him back.
Yes, exactly. Of course I would have never hurt my own nephew, but he never got the chance to show that that's what he was thinking.
Which of course is another part of the Tywin-Tyrion argument, which you can take Team Tywin for, because it really did sound terrible when you put it in the context of you would protect a whore over your own flesh and blood, and that's not going to sit well with Tywin.
Yes, it's terrible optics the way it played out.
The other aspect of the Bywater thing is how, to this point, control of the gold cloaks has been very critical to success within King's Landing. You know, I mean, that's what cost Ned.
Yeah.
And it's many ways it's what kept Tyrion going, you know, that he had won the gold cloaks over.
Yep. Good point.
Because he could have easily been, you know, Cersei could have got rid of him by the gold cloaks had he not got rid of, going to blank on the name.
Jaina Slynt?
Jaina Slynt, thank you. Look at you. That's why we bring you. That's why you're here.
Lord Jaina Slynt of Harrenhal by the end of
the bottom of the deep. So, the sellsword army, which, I mean, was only Tyrion's by dint of money, has been disbanded by Kevin Lannister. So he doesn't have those anymore. Bronn has been knighted at the command of Tywin Lannister, so Bronn's allegiance is confused. Yes. And he's even lost the Kettleblacks, who Cersei believed they belonged to her. Tyrion was outbidding her, so they actually belonged to him. Well, now they're doing the bidding of Tywin Lannister, and the whole family's been knighted.
Yes, right. So yeah, like Bronn, they were knighted by someone other than Tyrion.
Yeah.
And, but, so they were knighted by Tywin/Cersei. I probably Cersei proposed it to her father. I want these two knighted. It seems like, though, when Bronn told Tyrion that part, I thought, is that enough to completely cause them? I mean, why not get knighted and then continue to be a double agent if you're going to be a double agent, you know?
Again, I think it's the presence of Tywin in town. When Tywin's not in town, you can play the siblings Cersei and Tyrion against each other and make money. But once Tywin's there, you do what you're told, you know?
Yes. And like we were saying with Bronn, you can't outpay for loyalty when Tywin's in town because it's his money that you're using to pay.
You tell Tyrion, I want double what you were paying me. He has to go to his father. His father, what do you need that for? No, nothing, Dad. Nothing.
No.
But actually, it does make me wonder about the value of a knighthood, because the knighthoods have been bandied around since the battle. I think, didn't they say 300 or something?
It might even been more than that. Yeah, there was hundreds.
But what's the value? I mean, does it come with a stipend? I mean, it's just a title, right? I mean...
Yeah, you could be a landed knight, I guess.
You could be but I don't think these people are, right?
No,
I mean, they're just getting the title and nothing else. I mean, I would be a little bit hesitant to accept that as payment for all that I've done. And therefore, I would still be open to bribery and...
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so it does make you wonder, was knighthood enough? Is that all that they've... Or have they upped... Has Tywin upped the ante? Or is it like you said, once Tywin's in town, there's no topping that payment? But I guess becoming a knight does increase your chances of highborn marriage, and then that might come with lands and a castle.
Yeah, true enough. And of course, I mean, it doesn't have to be the end of the thing. I mean, I think for most of these hundreds of new knights, that's all it's going to be. Just this is our thank you. You can call yourself Sir, whatever, from now on. Yeah. But for the Kettle Blacks and for Bronn, it might be the tip of a larger payoff to keep them on side of whoever wants them on their side.
Yep.
Be it Cersei or Tywin or whoever.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes. Yeah, right. But so we also learn that Alayaya has been released, so that's a plus.
Yes.
Unfortunately, she was whipped, bloody, and then shoved out the castle gate naked, which it all hurts. Obviously, for Alayaya, it hurts physically, but for Tyrion, it hurts on multiple levels. First of all, it shows that he was unable to protect her. You know, which both stings for the innocent Yaya, not obviously physically, but I'm not talking physically here. But it's also worrisome for the safety of Shay, because the chapter ends with Tywin saying, I find another whore in your bed and I will hang her. So that's one level. That I guess that's kind of 2 levels on which it hurts. But also, it kind of probably brings up painful memories of Tysha, because she was also a prostitute that was tortured by her father while Tyrion stood by helplessly and then shamefully participated.
At this point in the chapter, when Bronn tells him about Alayaya, he assumes it's Cersei that did it. Later on in the chapter, he decides it was actually his father that had the whipping done.
Right.
Because, and that does actually make a certain amount of sense, because we know that Cersei is very fearful for the safety of her children. And whilst she probably thought the threat to Tommen of whatever happens to Alayaya happens to Tommen was probably an empty threat, she might not have gone ahead with it. It makes sense what he later concludes, that it was Tywin sort of like rehashing the Tysha incident to punish Tyrion. The one thing I would say about how it would hurt Tyrion, he also has to think, I'm glad I did it. I mean, you know, what I did has caused Alayaya to get hurt for no reason, and she is completely innocent of anything. But if I hadn't done it, that would have been Shay.
Oh, yes, good point. Yeah.
So I have protected Shay by doing this, you know.
That's a very good point, yeah. He feels guilty for Yaya's involvement, and he should. Yeah. But he didn't pick her to play the role. I'm guessing her mother, Chitaya, likely did. And surely Chitaya picked Alayaya because she felt that Yaya was the most trusted to keep their secret. But, you know, she had to have known she was putting her in some harm's way there.
So Tyrion's becoming obsessed with Cersei and what she's doing to undermine or straight up kill him. When Bronn arrives right at the start of the chapter, he's worried that it's one of Cersei's people coming to finish what Mandon Moore started. And of course, all this time of incapacity has just left Cersei time to plot with Tyrion, to put words into Tywin's head about all the things that she's done and all the things that Tyrion failed to do.
Yep, and we all know, all of us with siblings know the importance of being the first one to the parent with your version of the story. So, so that definitely plays a factor there. And he doesn't tell Bronn what Mandon Moore did, Mandon Moore's role, for fear of it getting back to Cersei. He's fearful of the spies, but I guess the reason you'd be fearful of the spies is you don't want to outwardly say this was Cersei that put Mandon Moore up to this. So, as a reason of why I want you to look into Mandon Moore.
Yeah, the thing is, it's a little convoluted, because if Cersei sent Mandon Moore, and she's got spies listening into everything that Tyrion is saying, and Tyrion has been grievously wounded and Mandon Moore has been killed, now you may not have witnessed what happened, but it's kind of logical to assume that Mandon Moore might have been the one to inflict the wound, and for Tyrion to say, investigate Mandon Moore, those spies, if they report that back to Cersei, it'll be like, oh, so he does think it was me that sent that. So you might as well say it.
Yes, absolutely. He also mentions that there are spiders, so he fears Varys finding out, but the only way it would hurt him, Tyrion, for if Varys found out, is if Varys told Cersei that Tyrion knows it was you, or thinks it was you. But like you said, if it was her, then only thing that does is Cersei knows that Tyrion thinks it was her. It's really not
right. And if it wasn't Cersei, then she has no idea how Tyrion got injured, and it doesn't particularly matter. And if it was Cersei, then him suspecting, she would expect him to suspect her.
Right, he survived.
Right, she's the one person who would want him dead,
yes.
Who would set a Kingsguard on him. She's the one person with authority and motive.
Yes, the only other option that equals her would be Joffrey.
Right, but if it was Joffrey and Cersei was completely blind to this, none of this would make any sense to her. She's like, what is he talking about?
Right, yes. But I guess it just goes to show he's becoming very paranoid about Cersei in general.
Yeah. Well, again, paranoia is an irrational fear that everyone's out to get you, right? His fears might be entirely rational in this case.
Yes, there are definitely some legitimate reasons for him to concern about her.
Yeah.
But, some of the other things, he was convinced that Cersei had hired Maester Balabar to keep him insensate. Now, he did personally learn that Grand Maester Pycelle killed Jon Arryn by removing Maester Coleman from Jon Arryn's care. So I guess there could be a lingering fear there that the same thing might be happening to him. But all in all, if Cersei had wanted him dead, there's been plenty of opportunity to put a pillow over his face while he was unconscious or send someone in to do it. If she wanted him dead, there's been enough opportunity.
I mean, it may have just been Mandon Moore having an axe to grind, but, I mean, it feels like, in many ways, let's assume it's Cersei, just for the sake of argument. That's a great result anyway. He's horribly wounded, lost all his power. It's kind of better in many ways. You get to sort of, see him brought down, and you can laugh at him all you want. That's probably a better result for her.
That's a good point, yeah. He's alive to see what she's done to him.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, he believes in his gut that it's Cersei.
Right.
And if that's true, it's a bit, she's changed the rules of the game, because to this point, it'd just been outmaneuvering each other. Now, she did take Yaya captive, which was another step beyond what they'd done to that point. But murder is a whole next level thing.
Right. And again, there is no question it has to be Cersei or Joffrey, or perhaps Tywin, conceivably, because the person doing it was a member of the Kingsguard, and only someone with an awful lot of authority could have authorized that.
Yeah, unless Ser Mandon had some terrible skeleton in his closet that someone is exploiting.
Right, and so I think you were questioning a little bit, what's the point of wasting Bronn's time with this? Well, there you go. You've just given a reason, because maybe it is possible that there is somebody had some leverage over him, somebody who might, maybe Peter Baelish, say, had some leverage over Mandon Moore, and this was the payoff.
Yeah, or Varys. Varys knows skeletons like nobody's business. Maybe we know he and Illyrio are scheming in some way.
But I'm still convinced by the friendship of Varys towards Tyrion.
Yeah, of course. Cersei said, "I felt that same. I thought Varys was my only friend in town for years until I discovered otherwise." So yeah, he seems good at that.
Yes, he definitely seems good at it. But the thing is, he is everybody's friend. He is nobody's enemy until he feels that person is doing something that goes against what he wants. And what he stated he wants is peace in the realm.
Right, until it's time for whatever they have planning.
Yes, he may have another plan. But obviously, those two things are not necessarily mutually exclusive. He may see the route to peace in the realm being to install a Targaryen back onto the throne.
Right.
But Tyrion's done nothing to offend Varys, as far as I can see. Other than by being smart and useful and...
a threat in that way.
A threat in that way, perhaps.
Yeah. You know how we are planning to open, and in our lovely painting from Jenny of Old Stones, we have opened our brown clothes haberdashery in Molestown.
Yes.
I think we also might want to consider opening a PR firm in King's Landing.
Okay.
Maybe inside the Red Keep, because
the
Lannisters, especially Tyrion, are terrible at public relations. And we see in this chapter that another very wealthy family is significantly better at it. The Tyrells are carting food up from the Reach into the starving King's Landing, all in the name of their soon-to-be-arriving future Queen Marjorie. That is how public relations works.
Right. Yes. Yes. You could literally see the Tyrells winning the throne here.
Yes.
Just ousting the Lannisters entirely. We've mentioned this several times. I mean, the Lannisters are so power hungry that they overlook the benefits of being benevolent overlords instead of malicious. But they always choose the malicious at the moment. Maybe the Tyrells will be a force for tempering their worst traits.
Possibly, yeah. And as we'll get to here shortly, we'll see that Tyrion's lack of PR savviness doesn't just stop at the public. It extends to family public relations as well.
Yeah. So Adam Marbrand has taken over from Jacelyn Bywater as head of the Gold Close. He was talked about in Tyrion 8 of Clash of Kings, which he's related to the Lannisters through Tywin's mother, Jane, who was a Marbrand. So that's the family connection. Probably very loyal to the Lannister cause. We've also seen him several times in the company of Tywin since they met up, since Tyrion met Tywin at the Inn of the Crossroads. He was at Harrenhal. He was the first to ride out to meet Robb and Edmure.
Yeah, we had conjectured it was because Robb had taken Ashmark, which is the seat of his house. That's why he was the first to ride out. And we also got a little insight into what the type of person that Adam Marbrand is, because Arya told us that the women of Harrenhal were sad to see him go.
I see.
So,
we skipped over it in the summary, but he bumps into Adam Marbrand as he's going into Tywin's rooms, and he comes across as a very friendly and decent character. He was polite and kind to Tyrion, and also, not unlike Jacelyn Bywater, he seemed to have a sort of a head for the job that in hand. He was worried about not having sufficient numbers, but at the same time not having enough money to pay them all, and so he was thinking about the job. He wasn't just
self-serving in the role as a stepping stone. Yeah, Tyrion thinks to himself that normally the Gold Cloaks would take umbrage with an outsider being placed over them, but he thought that the pick of Sir Adam Marbrand was a shrewd choice because, much like Jaime, he's the kind of man that other men want to be led by. They want to follow Adam Marbrand. He's got that kind of...
Yeah. Possibly, I mean, by comparison, Janos Slynt was a lick-spittle, greasy pole climber, whereas and Jacelyn Bywater was probably a little too straight-laced, sort of like not, whereas I think Adam Marbrand has that, seems to, from the very limited evidence we've got, seems to have that sort of everyman touch.
Yep, very much. I think I agree. And you mentioned the numbers in the Gold Cloaks. They did have some pretty heavy casualties, because we were told before the battle started that they were at around 6,000, and Marbrand tells us here that they're at 4,400, so that's a pretty decent loss in numbers, but it's still significantly more than under Robert, because Ned told us when he was talking to Littlefinger, when he wanted them on his side, he mentioned that they were 2,000 strong, so they're still more than double what they were before all this fighting started.
And this is where the Tyrell attitude comes in, you see. I mean, Tywin saying 4,400 is not enough. I mean, that's, Adam Marbrand reports that that's what Tywin had just told him.
Yeah, he was, I think he was specifically referring to finding Tyrek.
Oh, yes, he was specific. Yeah, that's true. But I mean, the point is, the Gold Cloaks are the security for the city.
Right.
You don't need 4,400 Gold Cloaks if the city's at peace with itself. If the people are not starving. That's where acting like the Tyrells can save you a lot of money.
Good point. Yeah. Marbrand tells us that only the gods and Littlefinger know how they're going to pay 4,400 Gold Cloaks. So, but he also that's kind of the first half of what he tells Tyrion and Bronn, and Pod, I guess. Pod was there as well. But the second half is that we learn that they're still looking for Tyrek Lannister. They've not found him dead or alive. And Tywin has not given up on finding him. And so Tyrek, he's 13, and he's Tyrion's cousin, but he is not Kevin's son. He is Tywin's younger brother, the second youngest of Tywin's brothers, Tyget, his son. And Tyget, I think we did a background on this once upon a time. Tyget died from a pox years ago. And so that is Tyrek's father. And it's also mentioned that Tyrek is married to who once was Ermison Hayford. And she is the one-ish year old lone survivor of House Hayford.
Oh, I was going to interject. Tyrion's joke here was that she's going to be widowed before she's weaned.
Right, that's the first person in the history of the Seven Kingdoms to be widowed before she's weaned. But I think the ongoing hunt for Tyrek, shows the importance that Tywin puts on family, which only makes it more impactful, his disregard and lack of support for his own son.
Right.
I wonder if he would put this much effort into finding Tyrion had Tyrion gone missing during the riot. Because that's where Tyrek went missing.
I bet he would.
Yeah.
Because that's how he is. He'd be delighted that Tyrion was dead. But at the same time, he would give him a sort of he would ensure that he was found and given full Lannister honours in funeral.
Because that's what Lannisters do.
That's what Lannisters do.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. Because theoretically, he started a war over Tyrion being taken captive.
Right.
Not because of Tyrion on the individual level, but because a Lannister was taken captive by a Stark.
Right. There you go.
Yeah.
So when they get into the solar of the Tower of the Hand, Tywin is writing important letters, as he describes them. So we want to speculate who he might be writing to. I mean, there are some potential allies out there. I mean, obviously, Dorne feels like it's in the fold. The Tyrells are in the fold now. But one that's sort of just suggests itself to me as sending them to Pike, to the Greyjoys.
Oh, right, because the Balon did reach out to Joffrey. Maybe he's responding back to that.
Right, that was one that occurred to me.
And of course, the veil is still in the wind.
The veil, of course, yeah.
That's a tricky one because Lysa is a Tully, and the Tullys are on the opposite side of the war. So that would be gutsy maneuver to reach out to Lysa.
And then the other ones, I mean, of course, it's you might try and peel off some actual allies from Robb.
Oh, yes, true.
That's who you might, but it's without spoiling. It's hard to imagine what they might be, who might be vulnerable to flipping sides.
Yeah. So he says that Stannis' claim ended on the Blackwater. So now Robb is his biggest threat. So it's possible he could be, like you said, dealing with Dorne, or maybe wrapping up something that has to do with his battle with Stannis, or working on new alliances with Robb. He mentions that the Red Wine ships need to come around so that they can finish off Dorne. You imagine they're over at the Reach, so they've got to get around to the east side of Westeros in order to assail Dragonstone. So maybe the letters are dealing with something involving the ships. Speaking of the war effort, we learn here that the Lannisters are actually, Bronn is the first one to bring it up, but the Lannisters know about the Helmund Tallheart, Robert Glover move to Duskendale. And so that begs the question, are these Lannister spies that are getting this information? Or are there Northern Stark moles that are giving them this information?
Yeah, they do know a lot of specifics. They know it's a third of the Stark force, who it's led by, specifically where it's going. The kind of thing that you would feel that the rank and file wouldn't know. So either it's a high-level mole or some very good spies,
Right. Yes. And you notice he gives no insight into it to Tyrion. He tells Tyrion it's nothing for you to matter to think about. You go back to bed.
I'm not sure that that's a Tywin anti-Tyrion thing. I think that's probably just Tywin's natural inclination is to not share information he doesn't need to.
Yeah, that's true. He's pretty calculating about such things.
Yeah.
But Tyrion's confused why Robb would send a force to Duskendale in the first place. There's nothing there worth the risk. And so he wonders, has the young wolf finally made a blunder?
Here's my guess, and this is, I promise this is not spoiler because I have no idea where this is headed. But because Tyrion said that, that means that it's not a blunder, that this is in fact some kind of trap that Robb is setting for the Lannisters.
Okay. With that line of thinking, you think that Robb did give the command to Roose to send them to Duskendale, because you remember he said in that Arya chapter, it was in the name of the word of the king or the name of the king or something like that he was sending them to do this. And Roose's explanation, if I remember correctly from that Arya chapter, was that Duskendale hadn't experienced the effects of the war yet. But there's got to be more to it than that, I would hope, because if Tywin's count is true and there's really a third of the Stark force being sent to Duskendale, that's quite the effort for
just to make them know that there's a war going on.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So
but now you've made me think. Well, okay, so if this was Roose Bolton on his own, then maybe it is a blunder.
Right. Yeah. Or does he have a plan? We don't know. He didn't say more than that in front of Arya, and we don't have any other POV in Harrenhal.
Tywin mentions that Littlefinger has been made Lord of Harrenhal, and that's obviously, we've heard several times that that's a big deal and
cursed.
But Tywin thinks it's an empty title because the Lannisters don't even hold it at the moment. But Tyrion, I think, thinks Littlefinger never does anything without thinking things through to their end point. So
exactly.
He would have been less keen to see this happen, I feel.
Yeah. I'm thinking that Littlefinger is more interested in the Lord Paramount part than just being the Lord of Harrenhal is great and all, but I think what he probably cares more about is the Lord Paramount. He's taken that from the Tullys, who spurned him when he tried to duel Brandon Stark for Kat's hand in marriage.
Interesting. That's probably true, but then that's interesting, because then that is a little bit. Is Littlefinger so motivated by revenge that he gets clouded on his vision? You know what I mean? That's not that calculating. That's just spiteful.
It's a pretty powerful position, I guess.
It is, but yeah, interesting. So anyway, Tyrion wants gratitude and acknowledgement for the things he's done.
Good thing he wasn't in the throne room, because his name wasn't mentioned. Everyone else under the sun was given acknowledgement and gratitude, except for him.
So it is understandable from his perspective. He did play a huge role in keeping Stannis from taking the city. Possibly a critical role. The chain, the plan to use the wildfire effectively, using the old boats as explosives, the marriage pact with the Tyrells, keeping Dawn out of the fight, marriage to Myrcella, and plus his efforts to keep the city fed. Because without that, the city could have fallen before Stannis got there. Stannis gave them every opportunity to starve to death.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it could have fallen, the city could have fallen from the inside. There was one riot, and that was after the efforts that Tyrion had made. There was no mention of his efforts during the whole ceremony. He wasn't there, so they could have just mentioned, and Joffrey could have said, my Uncle Tyrion's efforts, or we owe gratitude to my Uncle Tyrion for his efforts, and moved on, But, of course, Tyrion wouldn't have known about it. But, so Tyrion says, I want gratitude, and Tywin responds is, only monkeys and mummers need gratitude. But then he follows that up with, also, most people feel like my role and the Tyrells' role in attacking Stannis is what saved the city. So... But that's almost certainly true, because what Tyrion was doing is in the background, and that was sort of like the... Yes. That was the part they could see. Yes, exactly. But the city likely would not have lasted long enough for the Lannisters and the Tyrells to attack Stannis if it hadn't been for the groundwork that Tyrion laid. But of course, that was all under the covers, and not everybody saw that. Had those ships not all been destroyed, there could have been a whole different outcome there. Yeah.
But I will say, absolutely your point, you made this point, but it's an excellent one. The mummers and monkeys needing praise. Tywin Lannister rode into the throne room on a white horse. He's not playing down his own achievements at that point.
No, he's not. Can you get more riding on a white horse? Really?
Tywin, obviously, he expresses that he was concerned for Tyrion, that he visited him in his sick bed, but he also says that Jaime's not foolish enough to take his helmet off in battle, which... is a point. Why was Tyrion not wearing a helmet?
So I had to go back and look that up. So what happened was they were all out on that bridge of ships. Remember the bridge all these ships had got stuck together and created a bridge. He was out there with Ser Mandon, apparently Pod, and as the bridge was breaking up, he got knocked over and landed in the water, and his helmet started to flood with water, so he took it off.
Wow, Mandon Moore was very patient. I'm waiting.
Wait till you can see the white of his eyes and the rosiness in his cheeks. But ironically, he says this. Tywin says this about Jaime wouldn't be foolish enough to take his helmet off, but Jaime was foolish enough to rush into chasing raiders that ended up in an ambush and him being captured. So there's enough foolishness to go around in Lannister's battle.
There's always a fine line between being bold in battle and being foolish,
Yes, Very much. If it goes well, you're bold. If it goes poorly, you're foolish.
Yeah. Mostly it's a matter of luck, really.
Yes, exactly.
So the Lannister-Tyrell union, the two richest houses in Westeros, is this is power for a long time. This is power to rival anything that's been around for a few hundred years. Probably the last time there was something more powerful than that was when the Targaryens had their union with a bunch of dragons.
Right. Yes, I mean, this, the Baratheons are powerful and all, and the Lannisters obviously are the most wealthy, but you're pairing the Lannisters and the Tyrells. That's some serious wealth, and both can generate a lot of men, if necessary, a lot of huge fighting force, if necessary.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this could be quite the dynamic duo.
Yeah, and plus, I mean, they also have a lot of leverage over the lesser houses and over some of the other major houses as well, because the Reach is the breadbasket, and the West is the true wealth of the kingdom.
The bank.
Everybody relies on the bank, exactly. Everyone's going to rely on them in some ways, and so you can really use that to leverage them to join your side.
Absolutely. It's quite they'll make quite the power couple, yeah. Joffrey and Marjorie. But then Tyrion goes for it. He starts to leave. His father says, all right, go back to bed. And he starts to leave. And then he stops and turns and says, what do I want? I'll tell you what I want. I want what's by rights mine to inherit. I want Casterly Rock. And his father says, that's your brother's birthright. And Tyrion reminds him, no, it's not. For 18 years, it hasn't been my brother's birthright since he joined the Royal Kingsguard. You know this as well as I do. And, that he said he's never brought it up before. He doesn't say that. He tells us in his internal monologue, it's never been brought up before. But that in its own right, the fact that it's been 18 years is a bit of a slap in the face. That for 18 years, it's never been mentioned that he is technically now the heir.
Yep.
And his father says never.
Yeah. and cruelly blames Tyrion for killing Tyrion's mother, which obviously on some levels he did, but it's the worst possible thing you could say to a child who lost his own mother in childbirth.
Right. As if it was any fault of his. Yes.
But I'm not sure I understand Tywin's endgame here. So who will inherit Casterly Rock? I mean, Cersei's at the end of her childbearing years. Jaime's out. So that leaves only Tyrion or Cersei's children. Or maybe Tyrion's children. Maybe if Tyrion had like some 6-foot blonde son, that might be perfect.
Sure. Yeah. That's possible. Cersei's maybe not quite at the end. I mean, Jaime was 15 when he was brought into the Royal Kingsguard, and it's been 18
so
years.
They're only 33. No, they are a bit younger than I thought. But I mean, if Jaime never gets back to King's Landing, she doesn't want babies with anyone else. So. Good
point. Of course, with Tywin around, she might not have a choice. She didn't have a choice in marrying Robert either, so...
Yeah. So yeah, all right, there's a possibility there. But Joffrey already has the Iron Throne. That does leave Tommen as a possibility.
Right.
Unless Tywin's willing to go to a nephew like Lancel, perhaps.
Yeah, you're right. It's an odd situation there because he's got his son, but he doesn't want to put his son in that position. So there's got to be some heir. So yeah, maybe one of Kevin has other sons beside Lancel. Maybe that's why he's looking so hard for Tyrek.
Right. As we mentioned earlier, I do think there's a disconnect here between what we see of Tyrion and everyone else's impression. We always see the thoughtful, clear-headed, scheming, intelligent, loyal Lannister. I mean, he's
exactly.
Right. He works against his sister, but not out of spite, but because he thinks that her machinations are in the wrong direction.
Right.
And he has a big heart, but he does have a few hedonistic tendencies. But Cersei and Tywin just see the hedonist with perhaps a quick wit.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, there's from the moment he walks into that room, into his father's solar, he's just his whole personality changes, and he just everything that comes out of his mouth is snarky or coy. I think Tywin says, something about quit being coy. And, there's 3 straight responses that he gives to his father that are just pure snarkiness. Tywin says when his plan for the wedding is, and he makes a snarky response about, oh, I'm busy that day. And then he says about Cersei sending Balabar to take care of you because she feared for your life. And he says, oh yeah, that's why she never left my side. And then Tywin mentions about the wound, and he says, you'd praise Jaime if it happened to him in battle. It's just, he's so childishly contentious when talking to Tywin. And like you said, it just seems to be their persona that they both fall into.
So then that does sort of like cast a pall over whether or not Tywin is genuinely aware of Tyrion's strengths, because if he was, he would surely want Tyrion in charge of Casterly Rock over a lackwit like Lancel.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. I think Tyrion, in multiple instances in this chapter, misses opportunities to work into the conversation some of the good that he's done that Tywin might not know about, or that Cersei possibly had taken credit for or slanted in her direction. He could have said, yes, Cersei's plan for the wildfire was really smart, and it was a really great idea. Here's what I did to advance the plot with it.
All right. Do you have some background for us?
I do. So Adam R. Brand is the new commander of the City Watch, or the Goldcloaks, as we mentioned. He succeeds the short command of the very just Sir and then Lord Jacelyn Bywater, who succeeded the less so just Jaina Slynt. Slynt was the commander when our story started, so who was the commander before him? Well, Slynt took over for a man named Manly Stokeworth, who's obviously a member of House Stokeworth, which is a Crown Lands house. We know Manly died, however, we don't know how. Possibly, the timeline works out, it possibly could have been during the sack of King's Landing at the end of Robert's Rebellion. We know it was at least no earlier than that because it was Jon Arryn that appointed Jaina Slynt after Manly's death. So this was somewhere in the 280s to 290s time frame. And there's I had planned on talking about several of the past commanders, but there's no info about any other commander of the Goldcloaks for 150 years previous beyond Manly Stokeworth. So there are other ones we'll talk about, but this episode is a very long episode, so we'll just stop here for now with Manly Stokeworth.
So in comparison with the television show, we see Pod passing on the summons from Tyrion to Bronn in a brothel, a scene that is entirely gratuitous, but also quite funny. Tyrion is much healthier in the show. He and Bronn discuss the matters they discuss while they're taking a leisurely stroll on the walls.
Okay.
The scene with Tywin is very much captured, and Charles Dance as ever makes the scene pop when he turns on Tyrion and says he'd sooner have maggots eat his flesh than see Tyrion as Lord of Casterly Rock. It gives you chills. And the other thing, just to mention, I've said before, Marjorie is in King's Landing in the show. She's not arrived yet in the book. But the idea of the Tyrells being better at PR is manifested in the show by she's riding through town with Joffrey in a wagon. She gets out and sort of sits with the orphans and of Mother Teresa style. So that's how the sort of Tyrells being more benevolent is demonstrated.
Okay.
Pedantry corner. You've got one?
I do. There is an explanation for what I'm about to say. I'm just not sure it adds up.
Okay.
So, Tyrion asks Bronn, what do you know about Ser Mandon Moore? And Bronn's response is, I know he's bloody well drowned. And I wondered how he knows that.
Oh.
There's the only the only explanation that I could come up with, and I vetted this through our Discord server community because I was thinking, did I miss somewhere that Bronn would have found this out? The only possible explanation is that Pod told him. But
Right.
Tyrion, multiple instances in this chapter, talks about the knot in Pod's tongue.
His tongue, yeah.
So it seems unlikely that Pod would say, "Oh, hey, by the way, I killed Ser Mandon Moore. I pushed him into the water. He drowned."
Yeah.
So I just wondered how he knows. Either he just guessed, but he says, "I bloody well know he drowned."
Yeah.
So either Pod told him, or...
Which seems terribly unlikely, Pod saying anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. So mine is that Tywin dismisses Bronn and Pod so that he can talk to Tyrion alone by name. He knows both of their names. Now, there's explanations for this, that they are reporting to Tywin what's going on. But if I was Tyrion, I would be suspicious of why my father knew the names of Bronn and Pod.
Yeah, good point. Tywin did assign Pod as Tyrion's squire, but that was ages ago.
Exactly. I did think about that. He did assign him. He knows he's a pain. But remembering that his name was Podrick, I mean, Tywin might be very good at this kind of thing. But it seems to me like you'd be like, oh yeah, that kid, I remember. You know.
He uses that mnemonic method to remember people's names, possibly.
News and notes.
So George Martin had a very interesting blog update this week. It's rather long. I'm not going to talk about the whole thing. We don't have time for that, but it's very interesting. And he talked about his gardener writing style versus the architect writing style, which is the other version, apparently, according to him. And that because of that, he can't tell us concrete things like how the series ends. And he also mentioned that lately, things are moving further away from the Game of Thrones show and ending, which makes logical sense. As he points out, there's a lot more going on in the books than there are in the TV show. And he also said specifically that some characters who survived the Game of Thrones won't make it through A Song of Ice and Fire. And the opposite of that, not all who died in the Game of Thrones will die in A Song of Ice and Fire. But then he followed that up with, unless I change my mind. So, but it's a great read. It's worth checking out, reading the whole thing.
We're going to do another live video chat with our Royal Kingsguards and Lord Paramounts. That'll be on Saturday, July 30th, time to be determined. We'll post that on the Discord server.
Yeah, that should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that. We always have a great time with that.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. And hopefully we'll meet some new people because we're going to do it at a time suitable for others around the world, yeah?
Right. That's the plan.
All right, let's conclude this behemoth. So Tyrion is physically improving, but he's going to be psychologically wrecked from what just happened. He has moved heaven and earth to do the right thing for his family, and his reward is just a gut punch, basically.
Yeah. And we've, as he said, and as you mentioned earlier, he's been declawed by his father one by one, basically stripped of all the things that made him the power that he was in King's Landing is now completely gone, which is a concern that we talked about back when he was laying in bed with Shay and thinking he had it all. He had the job, he had the power, he had the woman, and he was fully embracing it. And our concern was, well, but you're only acting hand of the king. Now, of course, at the time, we did know this was coming.
Right.
So our concerns were more about the fact that we knew what was coming. But still, saying that those things when you know you're just acting hand of the king is, might be counting your chickens before they hatch.
Yeah. I'm going to say, thank goodness for Pod, because I think he might be his last friend. His only friend, perhaps.
The only person truly loyal to him.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
He did do an awful lot to protect King's Landing. He put everything into it. He put his life on the line. And without him, King's Landing would have fallen before Tywin arrived, But he's not going to get any credit for it. It's got to be galling.
Yes, absolutely. I was thinking he asks for Casterly Rock. Maybe he should have started a little lower. Asked for a spot on the small council. Work side by side with your father.
Oh, yeah.
Let him see that you are more capable than he thinks you are. And, prove to him you're worthy of being his heir. Maybe it would have never happened. Tywin spouted some serious vitriol. It might just be that it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
But his best chance might have been, I want to be a member of the small council. I'm going to prove to you that I'm capable and worthy of being your heir.
Interesting. And has Robb Stark blundered for the first time? Is he about to lose a huge chunk of his force because of Bolton's overreach?
Right. That's a good question. Could Robb possibly have actually wanted Roose to do that? Or we were under the impression that Roose just kind of went on his own and said, yeah, no, this is in the name of the king that I want you guys to do this. But or maybe they're up to something. Maybe they got a plan.
Yeah. And maybe the biggest news of all is Myrcella finally arrived in Sunspear after 7 months at sea.
Yes. She's basically a pirate now.
And
she's gonna talk like "arr."
She's been there for 3.5 months, but the letter back took the circuitous route as well.
Yeah, and it turns out that Prince Trystane Martell is enchanted with her, which sounds promising.
Yeah. There's 3 ways that you can help us. You could leave us a review. You could buy merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com. You could buy us an Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhal, or become a sustainer at the Lord Paramount or Knight of the Realm levels.
We would greatly appreciate any and all of that. And as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. We're at ghostharrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.